My parents humiliated me at my own wedding, calling me an expensive burden and demanding $500,000 for raising me. They thought I would cry, sign their paper, and stay silent in front of everyone. But the blue envelope in my hand held the truth they had buried for years. My father did not ruin my wedding by shouting. That would have been too honest. He ruined it with a smile, a cream-colored folder, and the kind of calm voice he used when he wanted a room to believe he was the reasonable one. We were standing inside Harbor Light Glass House, under a roof of rain-spotted glass, with the lake turning silver behind the windows and 130 people waiting for my first dance. My husband's hand was warm around mine. The string lights above us looked soft enough to forgive anything. Then my father stepped into the center of the floor, lifted one hand for silence, and said there was an old family matter that needed to be settled before I walked into my new life. My mother stood beside him in a pale blue dress, holding the folder against her chest like it was a Bible. My younger brother raised his phone and started recording, and my father looked at me, not like a father looking at his daughter on her wedding day, but like a man presenting a final bill. "Nellery," he said, "your mother and I are asking you to acknowledge what it cost to raise you, $500,000. The room went so quiet I could hear the rain sliding down the glass. But what my parents did not know was that my maid of honor had a blue envelope tucked under her chair, and inside that envelope was the reason their perfect family story was about to break open in front of every witness they had invited. My name is Nellery Bracken, though almost everyone calls me Nell. I am 31 years old, and I work as a medical billing advocate in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That means I spend my days helping people understand bills they are too scared to open. Hospital bills, insurance denials, surprise charges, payment plans that look official but do not always tell the truth. I have sat across from widows who thought they owed $80,000 when they owed $800. I have helped parents fight charges for treatments their insurance had already covered. I have explained, more times than I can count, that a number on paper can look powerful and still be wrong. I just never imagined I would have to explain that same thing to my own parents at my wedding reception. If you have ever been made to feel like love was something you had to repay, you will understand why I did not cry when my father said that number. I had been trained for that moment my whole life. I had been called expensive before I knew how to spell the word. I had been treated like a debt before I understood what debt meant. And by the time my father brought that folder to my wedding, I knew one thing very clearly. Some people do not want money, they want witnesses. So I gave them what they asked for. I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, in a white house with blue shutters and a kitchen wall that held my mother's favorite framed, quote, "Family means sacrifice." The words were painted in black cursive on a piece of fake reclaimed wood, the kind sold at craft fairs to women who want their kitchens to look like they survived a simpler century. Guests loved it. They would stand near the coffee pot and say, "Sylvie, that is so true." My mother would smile softly and touch the frame, like it had been passed down from a saint. But in our house, that sentence did not mean what other people thought it meant. In our house, it meant someone always had to be reminded of what they had cost. Most often, that someone was me. If I needed new sneakers because my toes curled against the front of the old ones, my mother's eyes moved to the frame. "We all give something up, Nell." If a school field trip cost $35, my father looked at the permission slip like it had insulted him. Another sacrifice. If the dentist said I needed braces, my mother cried in the car before we even reached the highway. Not because she was worried about my teeth, because, as she said while gripping the steering wheel, "You have no idea how much this family has already given for you." My parents were Ward and Sylvie Bracken, and if you asked anyone in town, they were good people. That was the first problem. Ward Bracken could remember the name of every couple who booked a wedding at Harbor Light Glass House. He knew whose grandmother needed a chair close to the aisle, whose uncle drank too much, whose father had died before the ceremony and needed a framed photo in the front row. He was tall, neat, silver at the temples, and gifted with the kind of patient smile that made strangers trust him before he earned it. My mother, Sylvie, was softer in public. She wore pearl earrings, wrote thank you notes in blue ink, chaired the spring charity brunch, and cried during every father-daughter dance she watched from the back of the venue. Together they owned Harbor Light Glass House, a wedding and event venue near Old Mission Peninsula, surrounded by cherry trees and lake wind. Couples came from Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, even Nashville, to get married under that glass roof. My parents sold them a dream of family, legacy, and love. Then they came home and reminded me that dreams were expensive. My younger brother, Perrin, was born when I was 6. The house changed when he arrived, but not in the way people told me it would. Everyone said I would be jealous because the baby would get all the attention. I was not jealous. I was relieved. For a little while, the attention moved away from me, and attention in our house usually meant cost. Perrin was healthy, loud, blonde, and adored by everyone. He got hockey lessons, baseball camps, new shoes before the old ones split, and a used truck when he turned 16. Nobody called him a sacrifice. Nobody showed him folders. Nobody sighed when he asked for lunch money. When I once asked why Perrin could go to hockey camp, but I could not go to a week-long art program by the lake, my father said, "Your brother did not start life with a debt." He said it while eating cereal at the counter, as if he were stating the weather. I was 11. I remember looking at the milk dripping from his spoon and thinking, I must have done something wrong before I was even born. The thing they always used against me was my health. I was born early, too early, according to my mother's version of the story, which changed depending on the audience. I had breathing problems as a baby, then complications when I was 3, then years of appointments, tests, therapy, and follow-ups that made my childhood feel like a hallway lined with waiting room chairs. I do not remember the worst of it. I remember the smell of antiseptic. I remember stickers from nurses. I remember my grandmother's hand holding mine during blood draws. I remember my father standing near hospital windows, not scared, not tender, but tired in a way that made me feel guilty for needing oxygen. By the time I was 8, I had been told so many times that I had nearly bankrupted the family that I began to imagine my hospital crib with a price tag hanging from the side. My 8th birthday was the first time I understood that my parents' jokes were not really jokes. We had a small party in the backyard. Store-bought cake, pink candles, paper plates with balloons printed on them. My grandmother, Arabelle Knox, came wearing a yellow cardigan and carrying a wrapped box tied with green ribbon. She was my mother's mother, though you would not know it from the way they behaved around each other. My mother became tense around Arabelle, like a student waiting for a test she had not studied for. Arabelle had silver hair, sharp eyes, and a voice that could turn soft or steel hard, depending on the truth required. After I blew out the candles, my father lifted his paper cup and said, "This one cost us more than the house, but I guess we'll keep her." Adults laughed. My mother smiled. Someone said, "Oh, Ward." Perrin, only 2, smashed frosting into his face. I smiled too because children learn quickly when laughter is expected. Later, Arabelle found me sitting behind the garage with my new box of colored pencils unopened on my lap. She lowered herself beside me, even though her knees hurt. "You are not expensive, Nellery," she said. "You are alive. Those are not the same thing." I did not know then that I would carry that sentence longer than I carried almost anything my parents gave me. Arabelle was the only person in my childhood who gave without keeping score. She lived in a small house near Sutton's Bay with wind chimes on the porch and books stacked in every room. She made soup without mentioning the price of vegetables. She bought me mittens and said they were the color of winter berries. She drove me along the lake roads and told me that water remembers every storm but keeps moving anyway. When my parents dropped me at her house, they always gave instructions like I was a complicated appliance. Don't let her run too hard, and don't give her too much dairy. Make sure she rests. Arabelle listened, nodded, and then, after they left, asked me what I wanted to do. Sometimes we baked, sometimes we walked slowly by the water, sometimes she let me sit at her kitchen table and draw, while she wrote letters in long, careful handwriting. Once, when I was 12, she took me to a public beach in October. It was too cold for swimming, but the lake was bright and restless. She wrapped a scarf around my neck and said, "When you grow up, never build a home with someone who treats kindness like a hook." I asked what that meant. She looked out at the water. It means real care does not wait for repayment. When Arabelle died, I was 14. The funeral was held on a gray morning with wet leaves stuck to the church steps. I remember my mother crying loudly near the casket and then getting angry because the florist had used more white lilies than blue. I remember my father shaking hands with people and accepting sympathy like he had personally managed Arabelle's death. I remember standing near the front pew, numb, holding a folded tissue I never used. Afterward at home, I asked what would happen to Grandma's things. My mother was sorting sympathy cards at the kitchen table. She did not look up. "There isn't much," she said. "Your grandmother loved big, but she did not leave anything useful." My father added, "People like Arabelle spend everything trying to feel generous." Then my mother gave me a shoebox with 3 scarves, a stack of postcards, and 2 letters Arabelle had written to me years before. I believed them. At 14, you still believe adults can be cruel and honest at the same time. A few months after Arabelle's funeral, I found the green folder. It was in the bottom drawer of my father's desk under old venue contracts and insurance forms. I was looking for printer paper for a school project. The folder had my name written on the tab in my mother's handwriting. Nell. Costs. I opened it even though I knew I should not. Inside were hospital statements, prescription receipts, insurance notices, appointment summaries, handwritten notes, and yellow sticky tabs. Some pages had numbers circled in red, some had phrases written in the margins. Therapy travel, special food, missed work, stress. I remember my hands getting cold. Not my whole body, just my hands. As if my fingers were the first part of me to understand. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. That night at dinner, my father asked why I was so quiet. I said I was tired. My mother looked at me and said, "You have no idea what tired is." I did not answer. I could still see the folder every time I blinked. High school was a long education in taking up less space. I learned not to ask for rides unless there was no other option. I learned to buy clothes from thrift stores and remove stains with baking soda. I learned which teachers kept granola bars in their desks. I learned to read my parents' moods before I entered a room. When I got into a summer writing program in Ann Arbor, my mother said, "It sounds wonderful, but wonderful things are for families who are not still catching up." When Pian's travel baseball team needed new uniforms that same summer, my father wrote the check in the kitchen and said, "Boys need structure." I was 16 by then, old enough to know unfairness by name, but still young enough to think maybe if I became easy enough, grateful enough, cheap enough, they would stop seeing me as a burden. They did not. I left for college in Grand Rapids with 2 duffel bags, a used laptop, and $93 in a checking account I had opened without my parents' help. My mother hugged me in the driveway with one arm and said, "I hope the world is as generous as we have been." My father gave me a $20 bill for gas and said, "Don't forget where the investment started." Perrin did not come outside. He was asleep. I cried for the first 40 miles, then stopped somewhere near Cadillac, bought a coffee I could barely afford, and promised myself I would never ask them for money again. I worked at a hospital billing office during the week and at a diner on weekends. I learned medical codes before I learned how to make friends. I learned that billed amounts and owed amounts were not the same. I learned that insurance adjustments could make a terrifying number collapse into something survivable. I learned that systems used fear as a collection tool. Maybe that is why I became good at my job. I had grown up inside a collection notice disguised as a family. By 27, I was working as a patient finance specialist for a nonprofit clinic network. My job was to sit with people after the worst weeks of their lives and help them separate panic from paperwork. One afternoon, an elderly man named Mr. Albright came in with a hospital bill for $92,000 after a cardiac procedure. His hands shook so badly he could not unfold the papers. His wife kept saying they would have to sell the house. I spent 3 hours reviewing the charges, EOBs, duplicate line items, charity care eligibility, and a coding error that had pushed part of the claim into patient responsibility. 6 weeks later, his balance was corrected to $1,800. He brought me a jar of homemade pickles and cried in my office. That day, I wrote a sentence on a sticky note and put it inside my desk drawer. A bill can look official and still be wrong. I did not know that sentence was waiting for my wedding. I met Dane Marrow at a community clinic fundraiser held in a fire station parking lot. It was one of those Michigan summer evenings when the air smells like charcoal, lake water, and cut grass. Dane was volunteering at the dunk tank because his sister had dared him, and he was laughing every time someone missed. He was not flashy. He had dark blonde hair, a careful smile, and the steady posture of someone used to measuring whether things could hold weight. He worked as a structural safety inspector, mostly bridges and municipal buildings. When he asked what I did, I told him I fought medical bills. He grinned and said, "I check bridges. You check bills. Between us, nobody gets away with weak support." It was a terrible line. I laughed anyway. 3 weeks later, we had dinner. 3 months later, I knew I trusted him more than I had trusted most people in years. Dane's family confused me at first. His father, Burke, was a retired public works supervisor with big hands, a quiet voice, and a habit of fixing things without announcing it. His mother, Lottie, ran a small library program and collected jars the way some women collect jewelry. The first time I went to their house, Lottie gave me homemade peach jam. I asked, automatically, "How much do I owe you?" The kitchen went still for half a second. Not angry still, gentle still. Lottie looked at me with soft eyes and said, "Honey, gifts do not come with a balance due." I almost apologized, which tells you how deep the damage went. Burke changed the subject by asking Dane to grab more plates, and I loved him a little for that. Nobody made me explain why I had flinched at kindness. They simply kept being kind until my body learned it was safe. Dane proposed at Sleeping Bear Dunes on a windy evening with sand in our shoes and my hair stuck to my lip gloss. There was no photographer hiding behind a tree, no violinist, no crowd waiting to clap. He held out a ring that had belonged to his great aunt and said, "Nell, I want to build the kind of life where you never have to earn your chair at the table." I said yes before he finished asking. When I called my parents, my mother gasped in a way that sounded almost real, then asked what date we were thinking. My father's first question was, "What does he make?" Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Do we like him?" Not even, "When can we meet his parents properly?" Just income, because in my father's world, love became serious when it could be converted into numbers. My parents insisted we get married at Harbor Light Glass House. I resisted at first. Harbor Light was beautiful, yes, but beauty does not erase history. I had spent summers there wiping chairs, folding napkins, carrying boxes of votive candles, and watching my parents sell strangers the kind of love I did not receive at home. The venue sat on a rise above the lake, its glass walls catching every sunset like a promise. Couples loved it. Photographers loved it. My mother loved walking through it with brides and saying, this place was built by family sacrifice. When Dane and I said we were considering a smaller venue near Grand Rapids, my father went quiet. My mother called that night and cried. "After everything we gave you," she said, "you cannot even let us host one day?" That was how she phrased control. Not as demand, as injury. I agreed because I was tired, because Dane said he would stand beside me wherever I chose, and because the road to Harbor Light past the beach where Arabelle once told me real care did not wait for repayment. I told myself I could reclaim the place. That was my first mistake. The venue contract arrived by email 2 days later, and even before I opened it, I knew it would not feel like a gift. It listed Dane and me as clients. It included a family discount, then added several odd lines beneath it. Heritage hosting adjustment, special family balance acknowledgement, damage and emotional disturbance deposit. I read the words 3 times. Dane leaned over my shoulder and said, "Emotional disturbance deposit? Is that a real thing?" I almost laughed. At Harbor Light, apparently. When I asked my mother about it, she said, "It is standard language." When I said I worked with billing language every day and had never seen that phrase, she sighed. Must everything be a fight with you? I let it go. That is one of the hardest things to explain about families like mine. You do not let things go because they are small. You let them go because you are saving energy for the large things you feel coming but cannot yet name. The letter from Ephraim Kells arrived 8 weeks before the wedding. It came in a plain white envelope with a Traverse City return address and my full legal name printed on the front. Nellery May Bracken. Almost nobody used my middle name except government forms and my grandmother. I opened it at my kitchen table while Dane rinsed dishes. The letter was short, formal, and strange. Per the instructions of Arabelle Knox, this office is required to contact you upon your marriage or your 31st birthday, whichever occurs first. Please call to schedule a confidential appointment regarding a family trust matter. I read it twice before the words found meaning. Dane dried his hands and sat beside me. What trust matter? He asked. I said, I have no idea. My voice sounded far away, like it came from another room. Ephraim Kells had an office above an independent bookstore near Front Street. He was in his late 60s, narrow-shouldered, with white hair combed straight back and glasses that made his eyes look larger than they were. His office smelled like paper, dust, and lemon oil. He did not waste words. After offering coffee and watching me refuse it with both hands wrapped around my purse strap, he opened a file. Your grandmother created a trust for your benefit when you were a child, he said. I stared at him. My grandmother didn't leave anything. His face did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Who told you that? My parents. He looked down at the file again. I see. Those 2 words carried more weight than a speech. The trust had been created after my second major hospitalization. Arabelle had sold land she inherited from her brother and placed the money into a protected trust for my medical care, education, housing stability, and eventual adult support. Ward and Sylvie Bracken had petitioned to serve as successor trustees after Arabelle died. According to the file, the trust was supposed to remain available to me when I turned 31 or married, whichever came first. I sat there while Ephraim explained trustee duties in careful, neutral language. Duty of loyalty, duty of care, duty to account, permitted expenses, beneficiary interest. I understood the words individually, but together they made my childhood tilt. How much was in it? I asked. Ephraim folded his hands. With growth, distributions, and available records, a little over $600,000 moved through the trust over the years. The room seemed to narrow around me. $600,000. My parents had told me braces nearly broke them. Field trips were sacrifices, winter coats were burdens. All those years, there had been money with my name attached to it. Ephraim was careful not to accuse anyone in that first meeting. I respected him for that, though part of me wanted him to be angry enough for both of us. Some distributions may have been legitimate, he said. Your care did involve real costs. The question is whether the trust was used only for your benefit and whether your parents kept proper records. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a summary of withdrawals. Some categories made sense at first glance. Medical, education, transportation, housing. Then the dates started to trouble me. A large housing-related withdrawal happened when I was 22 and living in a shared apartment in Grand Rapids, paying my own rent. A dietary support withdrawal happened the same month Perrin bought a catering trailer for his barbecue side business. A residential safety modification withdrawal occurred the year Harbor Light installed its West Glass wall. I had never lived at Harbor Light. I had not even slept under my parents' roof that year. I did not confront my parents, not then. That surprises some people when I tell this story, but confrontation is not always courage. Sometimes confrontation is just handing liars time to clean the room. Instead, I did what I knew how to do. I requested old insurance summaries. I called hospitals. I filed forms. I asked for explanation of benefits documents from archived records. I compared billed amounts to allowed amounts to patient responsibility to trust withdrawals. It was slow, ugly work. Some records were missing, some were incomplete. But enough came back to tell a story very different from the one my parents had spent years telling me. A surgery they claimed cost them $74,000 had left an out-of-pocket balance under $6,000 after insurance adjustments and a children's care grant. A therapy program my mother said she paid for by selling jewelry had been covered by a restricted education distribution from Arabelle's trust. Braces that had been used in family arguments for 15 years had been partly covered by a dental assistance program and partly reimbursed from the trust. My parents had not invented every cost. That would have been easier. They had done something more slippery. They had taken real fear, real illness, real paperwork, and inflated it until it became a weapon. The worst discovery was not a number. It was my mother's care logs. Ephraim found copies in an old trustee packet. They were handwritten, month by month, in Sylvie's neat blue script. Beneficiary requires additional emotional supervision. Family vehicle needed for beneficiary transportation. Household stress due to beneficiary condition. Parental support burden. I read them in his office with my mouth dry and my hands flat on my knees. Some entries were from years when I was away at college. One said I required daily household care during a semester when I was working 30 hours a week and sleeping in a room above a garage because it was the cheapest rent I could find. Another note supported a withdrawal for nutritional management the week Paran posted pictures online of his new smoker trailer. My mother had written me into dependence long after I had escaped it. On paper, I was still the sick child. On paper, they were still sacrificing. On paper, they were still noble. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ephraim showed me the Harbor Light records. That was when the story turned from painful to dangerous. A trust withdrawal marked residential safety modification for beneficiary had been transferred into an account used for Harbor Light's west glass wall renovation. The glass wall was one of the venue's signature features. Brides posed in front of it. My mother called it the heart of Harbor Light. My father told clients it represented transparency, which would have been funny if it had not made me want to be sick. Another withdrawal connected to beneficiary dietary support appeared to match the purchase of equipment for Perrin's catering trailer. Perrin had started doing barbecue events on the side, using Harbor Light as his main client base. My medical history had helped buy his smoker. My supposed care had helped build the room where I was about to be married. Ephraim prepared a formal request for accounting. He sent it to my parents by certified mail. He also prepared a preservation notice, which meant they were instructed not to destroy records. He explained that if the venue had been improved with misused trust funds, we might be able to pursue a constructive trust claim or other civil remedy. He used careful words. Potential. Apparent. Requires review, improper if substantiated. I asked him if they could go to jail. He took off his glasses, cleaned them, and said, "My role is civil recovery, not criminal prosecution. And right now, the strongest move is to force a full accounting." I nodded like I was calm. Inside, I was 14 again, holding that green folder labeled Nell. Costs. Through all of this, I did not tell Dane everything at once. Not because I did not trust him, because speaking it made it real, and I could only make it real in pieces. He knew about the letter. He knew there was a trust. He knew records looked wrong. One night, after I had been quiet for almost an hour, he sat beside me on the couch and said, "You know you don't have to protect me from your pain." I looked at him then, really looked, and told him about the care logs, the inflated bills, the glass wall, the way my parents had called me expensive while spending money, meant to protect me. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he did not say, "I'll fix it." He did not say, "Forget them." He simply took my hand and said, "Whatever happens at that wedding, I am on your side before I understand the paperwork." That was the moment I knew I had chosen correctly. The week of the wedding arrived with cold rain and false sweetness. My parents became gentle in a way that made my skin prickle. My mother brought me a pearl hairpin in a velvet box and said, "I kept this for the day my daughter became someone else's responsibility." She smiled when she said it. I smiled back because there are insults so polished they look like gifts. My father hugged Dane too hard at the rehearsal and said, "After Saturday, accounts change." Perrine watched everything with a lazy grin, like a man who knew a joke before the punchline. His girlfriend, Calla Vire, was the only one who looked uncomfortable. Calla worked in hospitality and had helped at Harbor Light events for years. She had sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, and the nervous habit of twisting a silver ring around her finger whenever Ward spoke. The rehearsal dinner was at a lakeside supper club near Sutton's Bay. All dark wood, white plates, and windows looking out at water that had gone black under the evening sky. Burke gave a warm little speech about marriage being less like building a perfect bridge and more like checking the supports every season. Lottie cried into her napkin before he finished. Rue Bellwether, my best friend and maid of honor, squeezed my hand under the table. Rue was a school counselor, calm in every emergency, except when restaurants forgot her side of ranch. She knew more about my childhood than anyone except Dane. She had also agreed to hold anything I needed held, including secrets heavy enough to bend the night. Then my father stood. He lifted his glass and smiled at the room. "Some parents raise children," he said. "Some parents carry investments until they mature." A few people laughed because they thought they were supposed to. Burke did not. Dane did not. I felt the old coldness settle into my hands. After dinner, Burke found me near the coat rack. He did not crowd me. He just stood beside me, watching rain beat on the window. "That did not sound like a joke," he said. "That sounded like a bill warming up." I looked at him, startled by how plainly he had seen it. "I think you may be right," I said. He nodded once. "Then don't stand alone when it comes due." That was Burke. No drama, no speech, just a support beam quietly placed where the roof might sag. Calla warned me the next morning. I was in the venue kitchen, checking with the caterer about coffee service, when she slipped in through the side door. She wore a raincoat over her dress and looked like she had not slept. "Nell," she said, "your parents aren't planning a toast." My stomach dropped without moving. "What are they planning?" She looked toward the office hallway. "A signature." She told me she had seen Ward printing documents in the venue office. My mother had called it a family reimbursement and gratitude agreement. They planned to present it at the reception before the first dance. They wanted me and Dane to sign it in front of everyone. Calla swallowed hard. "It says $500,000, 10 years. Dane's name is on it, too." For a moment, the room lost sound. The caterer's trays, the refrigerator hum, the rain on the roof, all gone. Then everything returned, too loud. "Why are you telling me?" I asked. Calla twisted her ring. "Because I've ignored a lot in that family. I'm trying not to ignore this." That afternoon, my mother came to my hotel room. She did not knock like a visitor. She used the key card she had insisted on having for emergencies. I was standing near the mirror with my hair half pinned. She looked at me for a long moment, and something like grief crossed her face. For 1 second, I thought she might tell the truth. Instead, she said, "Do not embarrass your father tomorrow." I turned slowly. "Why would I embarrass Dad?" She walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. "He has carried a number in his chest for years." "What number?" I asked, though Calla had already told me. My mother's reflection looked older in the glass. "You already know." Then she left. She did not ask if I was nervous. She did not say I looked beautiful. She did not touch my shoulder. She came to protect the number. I called Ephraim from the hotel bathroom with the shower running so no one passing the door could hear. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do not sign anything. Do not accuse beyond the documents. If they make this public, you may state what the records show." He had already prepared a packet for me, but after Calla's warning, he revised the front page into a plain summary I could read under pressure. It was careful, factual, and clean. No rage, no speculation. Just document titles, dates, withdrawal labels, and requests for accounting. He also included Arabelle's sealed personal letter. "She wanted you to have this when you were ready," he said. "Given tomorrow, I think you should carry it." I picked up the packet from his office at 6 that evening. It was inside a blue envelope, thick, stiff, and strangely ordinary. I held it in both hands in the parking lot while rain tapped the hood of my car. It weighed less than a pound. It contained almost my whole life. I gave the blue envelope to Rue the morning of the wedding. She was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, eating dry cereal from a paper cup, because stress made her practical. "If my parents do anything during the reception," I said, "bring this to me when I ask." Rue took the envelope and did not open it. "Anything? You'll know." She studied my face. School counselors know when a child is hiding fear behind correct posture. Apparently, that skill works on brides, too. "Do you want me to spill red wine on your dad before he starts?" she asked. I laughed for the first time all morning. "Not yet." She tucked the envelope into her tote bag, then laid her under her chair at the head table. The blue corner was barely visible if you knew to look. I knew. All through hair, makeup, flowers, photos, I knew. The ceremony was beautiful in a way that almost hurt. Rain traced silver lines down the glass roof. The lake behind Harbor Light looked endless and cold. Cherry branches stood in tall vases along the aisle, bare except for tiny white lights wrapped around them. Dane waited at the front in a charcoal suit, his eyes already wet. My father walked me down the aisle. His arm was stiff beneath my hand. I could smell his aftershave. I could feel the folded paper in his inside pocket when his jacket brushed my arm. For a few steps, I let myself imagine a different life, one where that walk meant pride without calculation. Then we reached Dane, and my father placed my hand in his like he was transferring responsibility. Not blessing. Responsibility. Dane's fingers closed around mine, warm and certain. Our vows were simple. Dane said, "I promise to make home a place where you never have to earn your chair at the table." The words moved through me like light through water. I heard Lottie sniffle. I heard Rue breathe out. My mother's smile tightened. When it was my turn, I said, "I promise that our love will not be measured by what we can collect from each other. I promise care without ownership, honesty without performance, and a home where no kindness waits for repayment." My father looked down at his shoes. Maybe the words touched him. Maybe they offended him. With Ward Bracken, those often looked the same. After the ceremony, the reception began with warmth my parents had not prepared for. That mattered. A room has a memory. Before my father tried to define me, other people had already spoken the truth. Rue gave a toast about my work, about the single mother whose $38,000 bill turned into a charity care approval, about the time I stayed 3 hours late because an old man was too ashamed to admit he could not read the insurance letter. "Nell does not just fight bills," Rue said. "She fights the fear that makes people believe paper is stronger than they are." Burke stood after her and raised a glass. "Nell," he said, "we do not gain a daughter tonight because we paid for one. We gain one because she chose us." The room clapped. Dane squeezed my knee under the table. My father's face did not move, but I saw his hand go to his coat pocket. The first dance was supposed to happen after dinner. The quartet was ready. The floor had been cleared. Dane stood and held out his hand to me. I was halfway out of my chair when my father stepped forward. "Before the bride and groom dance," he said, "I ask for a few minutes of family respect." Dane's hand tightened around mine. I felt the room shift. My mother walked to him with the cream folder. Perrin lifted his phone. Calla, sitting near the side doors, went pale. My father smiled at the guests. "Many of you know our story," he began. "You know our family has carried challenges. You know Sylvie and I gave everything we had to raise our daughter, medical needs, special care, schooling, housing, years of sacrifice most people never saw." My mother opened the folder. I watched her fingers. They did not shake. That hurt more than if they had. Ward continued. "We never wanted repayment when Nellery was young. A child cannot understand what parents give up. But now she is grown. She has a career. She has a husband. She is starting a new household with 2 incomes and a future." He looked at Dane then, bringing him into the trap. "So we believe it is time for gratitude to become action." My mother removed a document and held it up just enough for the front row to see the title: Family Reimbursement and Gratitude Agreement. Someone near the back gave a nervous laugh, then stopped when nobody joined. Sylvie read in her soft charity board voice, Total parental reimbursement requested, $500,000 payable over 10 years, with the first good faith payment due 90 days after marriage. She paused. Both Nellery Bracken-Merrow and Dane Merrow may sign below as acknowledgement of the debt carried by Ward and Sylvie Bracken. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then whispers spread along the tables like wind through dry leaves. Lottie covered her mouth. Burke stood halfway, then stopped because Dane had not moved. Rue's eyes found mine. Dane leaned close and said quietly, Say the word. I put my hand on his arm. Not yet. My father placed the document on the small table beside our untouched first dance champagne. He slid a pen next to it. This is not about punishment, he said to the room. It is about honor. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. I looked at my mother, who was already arranging her face into sorrow. Then I looked at my father. Are you asking for money, I said, or are you asking me to agree with your story? Ward blinked. He had expected tears, refusal, maybe Dane's anger. He had not expected a question. Both, he said finally. Family should know the truth. I nodded once. Then they should know all of it. I turned to Rue. The blue envelope, please. The room changed before the envelope reached my hand. People understand props even when they do not understand facts. My parents had brought a cream folder. I had a blue envelope. That meant there was another side, and my father's face showed the first crack of understanding. Rue stood, lifted the envelope from beneath her chair, and brought it to me. No drama, no speech, just a friend delivering the truth at the exact moment it was needed. My mother said, Nellery, what is that? Her voice was sharp now, not wounded. Sharp. It's what you should have told me about years ago, I said. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were the packet, Arabelle's sealed letter, and the one-page statement Ephraim had prepared. My hands were steady. They always are when paper becomes the only safe place to put pain. I held up my parents' document first. I work with bills every day, I said. My voice sounded clear, almost strange in the glass room. The first thing I teach people is this. Official paper is not the same thing as truth. Nobody spoke. Even the rain seemed quieter. My parents are asking me and my husband to sign a document saying they personally carried $500,000 in costs to raise me. They brought that claim here, in front of you, before my first dance. So I am going to answer it here. Ward took one step toward me. Be careful, he said. I looked at him. I am being careful. That is why I have documents. I did not start with the trust. Not yet. A reveal is like a wound. If you tear it open all at once, people look away. So I started with what I knew best. Many of the costs my parents described were real events, I said. I was a sick child. I had medical care. I had appointments. I had treatments. But a billed charge is not always an amount paid. I lifted the first page. One procedure my parents have described for years as a $74,000 sacrifice shows an actual out-of-pocket family responsibility of $5,870 after insurance, adjustments, and grant assistance. My mother whispered, Stop. I continued. A therapy program I was told nearly emptied my parents' savings was paid through restricted education funds. Orthodontic costs used in family arguments for 15 years were partly covered by assistance and partly reimbursed. I set the page down. I am not saying there were no costs. I am saying the story was inflated. My father's jaw tightened. You have no idea what we paid emotionally. There it was. When numbers weaken, manipulators move to feelings because feelings leave fewer receipts. I nodded. You are right that emotional strain is real, but your document asks for money, so I'm responding with financial records. A few people murmured. I saw Burke's mouth press into something close to approval. Then I took out the trust summary. My grandmother, Arabelle Knox, created a trust for me when I was a child, I said. My mother's face drained so fast it looked like someone had opened a valve. My father went very still. Perrin lowered his phone an inch. I did not know this trust existed until 8 weeks ago. I was told my grandmother left nothing useful. That was not true. My voice almost broke on useful, but I caught it. The trust was for my medical care, education, housing stability, and eventual adult support. After my grandmother died, my parents became trustees. I looked at Sylvie. That means they had a legal duty to manage it for my benefit. Ward recovered first. That money was used for you. Some of it may have been, I said. That is why my attorney requested a full accounting. My father's eyes flicked toward the back of the room, where Ephraim Kells sat at a small table near the windows in a dark suit, quiet as a closed book. Ward saw him. That was the moment he understood. The blue envelope was not emotional, it was legal. I continued. The records currently available show that more than $600,000 moved through that trust over the years. Some withdrawals matched legitimate needs, others are difficult to explain. My mother pressed one hand to her chest. We did what we had to do. Then the accounting will show that, I said. But right now, the records show a withdrawal labeled residential safety modification for beneficiary. I let the phrase sit. That money went toward the west glass wall of Harbor Light. No one moved. People turned, almost involuntarily, toward the wall behind us. The famous west glass wall, shining with rain and reflected candles. The heart of Harbor Light. The place every bride wanted in her photos. I looked at my parents. I never lived here. This venue was not my residence, but money from my trust helped build the wall we are standing beside tonight. The silence after that was different from shock. It was comprehension arriving in pieces. My father's face reddened. My mother gripped the folder so hard it bent. Perrin stood up. That's not fair. You're twisting it. I turned to him. There is also a withdrawal labeled dietary and mobility support for beneficiary. The date and amount correspond with the purchase of equipment for your catering trailer. Perrin's mouth opened. I didn't know it was from your trust. Calla stood near the side doors. Her voice was small but clear. You knew there was family money under Nell's name. You joked about it in March. Perrin stared at her like betrayal had never occurred to him as something he could receive. My mother began to cry then, not loud. Not the church brunch tears people had seen before. These were angry tears, humiliated tears. I kept you alive, she said. The sentence hit me in the chest because part of it was true. She had taken me to appointments. She had measured medicine. She had sat in waiting rooms. Painful people can still perform necessary acts. That is one reason leaving them is complicated. Grandma helped keep me alive, I said. Doctors helped, nurses helped, insurance helped, grants helped. You helped too, Mom, but you also helped keep me guilty. She flinched, as if I had slapped her. I had not raised my voice. I think that made it worse. Ward pointed at the blue packet. That money came to us because we were your parents. Ephraim stood before I could answer. He did not rush. He buttoned his jacket and spoke with the calm of a man who had spent 40 years watching people regret paper trails. Mr. and Mrs. Bracken, funds held in trust do not become personal compensation because trustees are parents. Ward's face tightened. This is a family matter. Ephraim nodded. You made it a public matter when you asked 2 people to sign a repayment agreement in front of witnesses. He looked at the cream folder on the table. You received a request for accounting 2 weeks ago. This document increases the urgency of that request. He did not threaten. He did not need to. The law is most frightening when it does not raise its voice. My father turned back to me, and for a moment I saw the man behind the charm. Not the venue owner, not the father of the bride, not the respected community figure, just a scared, angry man whose story had stopped working. "Do you know what your condition took from us?" he said. There it was, the old blade pulled from the old drawer. My illness, my body, my first debt. I looked past him at the West glass wall, at the rain moving down it in thin, bright lines. "My condition did not take this venue," I said. "You did." A gasp moved through the room. My mother sat down as if her legs had been cut from under her. Perrin swore under his breath. Ward looked around, searching for the room he had controlled minutes earlier. It was gone. I picked up the family reimbursement and gratitude agreement. "This document says I owe $500,000 for being raised," I said. "But the records show that money meant for my care was already used, hidden, and in some cases directed toward things that did not benefit me. You are asking me to repay a childhood you already charged to my grandmother." My voice softened. "Not for them. For myself. I am not signing gratitude into debt." I placed the document back on the table and took the pen. For one insane second, my father looked relieved, as if he thought I might sign after all. Instead, on the signature line, I wrote one word in clean block letters: "Denied." It is strange what people remember from a public collapse. Some remember the big sentences, some remember the legal terms. I remember the sound of that pen-scratching paper. I remember Dane standing beside me, not in front of me, because he knew the difference between protecting and taking over. I remember Lottie crying quietly into Burke's shoulder. I remember Rue's hand on my back. I remember Calla walking out through the side door, leaving Perrin standing there with his phone hanging uselessly at his side. I remember my mother whispering, "Arabelle always thought she was better than me," which told me more than an apology would have. I remember my father saying nothing at all. Dane took the microphone after a long silence. He looked at me first, asking permission without words. I nodded. His voice shook a little, but it held. "The first dance was supposed to happen 10 minutes ago," he said. "I still want it." A few people gave a broken laugh. He turned to me and held out his hand. "No one gets to take that from us unless we hand it over." So I stepped onto the dance floor with him. The quartet, bless them, recovered faster than half the family. They began to play softly, something slow and warm I barely recognized. At first it was just Dane and me moving under the glass roof while rain wrote its own language above us. Then Burke took Lottie's hand. Rue pulled one of Dane's cousins onto the floor. A few friends joined. It was not a party at first. It was more like people carefully returning oxygen to a room. But by the end of the song, I was breathing. My parents left before dinner was finished, not together. My mother went first, holding the bent cream folder. Perrin followed, arguing into his phone. My father stayed near the office hallway for almost 20 minutes, talking in a low voice with someone I could not see. Maybe he was trying to save the venue schedule, maybe he was calling a lawyer, maybe he was just standing in the building he had built with money he told himself he deserved. When he finally walked out, he did not look at me. That was fine. For most of my life, he had looked at a version of me that did not exist anyway. The reception continued because life is rude and merciful that way. People still needed cake. Elderly guests still needed coffee. Someone's toddler still fell asleep under a table. The photographer asked if we wanted to skip family portraits, and I said yes, so quickly. She nodded like she had been waiting for permission. Guests approached me carefully as if I were made of cracked glass. Some apologized for believing my parents. Some said they had always felt something was wrong, but never knew what. A woman who had booked her daughter's wedding at Harbor Light for the next spring squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so sorry. Also, I may need your attorney's card." It was the first time I laughed without pain that night. Near midnight, Dane and I stood outside under the venue awning. The rain had stopped. The parking lot shone black under the lights. Inside, a few people were still dancing. I had taken off my heels and stood barefoot on the cold concrete, my dress gathered in one hand. Dane wrapped his jacket around my shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked. It was a simple question. but simple questions can be impossible after complicated damage. I thought about the folder labeled Nell, costs. I thought about Arabelle's yellow cardigan. I thought about the glass wall behind us and the word denied drying in ink on my parents' document. I don't know, I said. But I think I'm done being billed. Dane kissed my forehead. That's a start. The morning after the wedding, my father posted a statement on Harbor Light's Facebook page. Family disagreement disrupted a private celebration last night. Harbor Light remains committed to love, unity, and respectful events. He did not mention the trust. He did not mention the reimbursement agreement. He did not mention that he had asked his daughter and new son-in-law to sign a 10-year payment plan before their first dance. My phone filled with screenshots before I finished breakfast. I did not respond publicly. That was hard, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned that not every truth belongs on the same stage as the lie. Ephraim filed the formal petition to compel accounting that week. The preservation notice became sharper. The venue records became relevant. My parents hired a lawyer who wrote that Ward and Sylvie had acted in good faith under difficult family circumstances. Ephraim read the letter, raised one eyebrow, and said, "Good faith keeps records." The town did what towns do. It talked. Some people defended my parents because they knew the version sold at charity brunches and venue tours. Some people defended me because they had been in the room. Some people pretended to know legal details they absolutely did not know. 3 couples postponed Harbor Light bookings. 1 canceled outright. My father blamed me through relatives. My mother sent no message at first. Perrin texted once, "You destroyed the business." I wrote back, "No, I found the receipts in the walls." He did not answer. Calla left him 2 weeks later. Rue sent me a screenshot of Calla's new apartment keys with the caption, "Some women escape in stages." I saved it. A month after the wedding, a box arrived from my mother. No note. Just my name on a shipping label printed from the venue office. Inside were childhood items wrapped in tissue paper. Baby shoes, school drawings, hospital bracelets, 2 faded sweaters, and the kitchen frame. Family means sacrifice. I stared at it for a long time. Dane offered to throw it away. I said no. I do not know why. Maybe because some objects become witnesses too. That night, I removed the backing from the frame. I expected dust, maybe a dead spider, maybe nothing. Instead, folded behind the cardboard was a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, with my name written in Arabelle's handwriting. Nellery. My hands started shaking before I opened it. The note inside was only 3 sentences. My mother must have hidden it there years ago or forgotten it existed. Maybe Arabelle put it there during one of her visits. I will never know. It said, "If they ever use sacrifice to make you small, remember this. Real love protects without applause. You were never the cost of this family, my Nellery. Only the truth they did not want to face." I sat on the floor with the frame beside me and cried harder than I had cried at the wedding, not because I was sadder, because I was finally being comforted by someone who had been gone for 17 years and still knew exactly where to place her hand. The legal process took longer than anyone in a story wants it to take. Real consequences are not as clean as a dramatic speech. There were records to request, bank statements to match, trustee decisions to review, lawyers to answer, deadlines to extend. My parents claimed some records had been lost in a basement flood. Ephraim found archived statements. My parents claimed Harbor Light improvements benefited the family as a whole, including me. Ephraim asked when I had lived there, worked there for pay, or received income from it. My parents claimed Perrin's catering trailers supported family events that included my dietary needs. Perrin, under pressure, admitted the trailer was for his business, not a heroic confession, not a tearful apology, just a man in a conference room realizing paperwork had more stamina than denial. The settlement did not make me rich overnight. That is not how these things usually work. There were negotiations, valuations, tax concerns, and arguments over what had been legitimate support versus improper use. In the end, my parents agreed to a partial repayment schedule tied to venue income and refinancing restrictions. Perrin's planned ownership transfer was blocked until the accounting was complete. Ward and Sylvie signed a written statement that I owed them no reimbursement for my upbringing, medical care, education, housing, or childhood support. That sentence mattered more to me than the first check. They tried to include a confidentiality clause broad enough to let them keep telling people I was ungrateful. I refused. I did not need permission to tell my own life. My mother wrote to me 4 months after the wedding. A real letter, not a text, not a message passed through relatives. Her handwriting looked smaller than I remembered. She wrote, "I called you a burden because if I called you protected, I would have had to admit I spent your protection." I read that line in my car outside work and sat there until the windows fogged. It was the closest thing to truth she had ever given me. It was not an apology, not fully. It did not repair the care logs or the folder or the years of guilt, but it named the wound without dressing it up as sacrifice. I put the letter in a file. I did not call her, not yet. Maybe not ever in the way she wants. Boundaries are not revenge. Sometimes they are the first honest architecture a family has ever had. My father never apologized. The first repayment check arrived with a memo line that said, "Trust reimbursement, partial payment." No note, no signature beyond the printed business name. I looked at it for a long time, then deposited it into a new account. Not for a vacation, not for a car, not for anything my parents could call selfish in a story they told themselves. Dane and I used part of the settlement to start a small patient relief fund through the clinic network where I worked. We named it the Arabelle Knox Patient Relief Fund. It helps people pay the portion of medical bills that remains after insurance, grants, and charity care have done all they can. The first person it helped was a young mother whose son needed follow-up care after surgery. When she cried in my office, I thought of Arabelle's hands, warm around mine in a waiting room, and I silently thanked her for still paying love forward without asking for applause. Dane and I bought a modest house outside Grand Rapids with a front porch, uneven floors, and a maple tree that drops leaves faster than any 2 adults can rake them. Burke fixed the porch railing without mentioning it. Lottie brought soup and did not ask what we owed. Rue comes over on Fridays sometimes and falls asleep during movies she picked. Calla sends a Christmas card now. Perrin has not spoken to me except through lawyers, though I heard he sold the catering trailer. My mother writes twice a year. My father works longer hours at Harbor Light, according to people who still think I need updates. The west glass wall is still standing. I know because couples still post photos in front of it, smiling under all that borrowed light. I keep Arabelle's letter framed in my office, not the family means sacrifice sign. That old sign is in a box in the basement. Not because I am afraid of it, but because I no longer need it on a wall to remember what it taught me. Family does involve sacrifice sometimes. Of course it does. Parents lose sleep. Children need care. Illness costs money. Life is not free, but care is not ownership. Sacrifice is not a loan. And a child is not an account that matures when she marries. My parents demanded $500,000 for raising me because they believed the room would shame me into agreement. They believed paper could make a lie respectable. They believed my husband's family, my friends, and our guests would become witnesses against me. Instead, they became witnesses to the truth. My wedding envelope did not make me rich. It did not fix my childhood. It did not turn my parents into different people. What it did was simpler and stronger than that. It gave me back the story they had been charging me to carry. My grandmother had not left me a fortune so I could become powerful. She left protection for a child everyone kept calling expensive. And on the night my parents tried to bill me for being loved, that protection finally reached me. So if anyone ever hands you a debt for surviving their care, remember this. A bill can look official and still be wrong. A family story can be repeated for years and still be false. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is open the envelope, read the truth in a steady voice, and refuse to sign your gratitude into debt. Commentary, discussion, explanation, and lessons. Now let's talk about the story we just heard, because this was not only a wedding drama. This was not only about parents asking their daughter for money. This was a story about control, family image, emotional debt, hidden truth, and the quiet power of refusing to sign your life away just because someone calls it love. At the surface, the story is about Nell, a woman whose parents publicly demanded $500,000 from her at her own wedding. But under that shocking moment, there is a much deeper question. What happens when the people who were supposed to protect you turn care into ownership? What happens when a parent uses the word sacrifice so many times that the child starts believing their own life was a burden? That is the real heart of this story. The opening scene is powerful because it puts us straight inside the worst possible moment. A wedding should be about love, family, joy, and a new beginning. But Nell's father chooses that exact moment to bring out a folder and turn the reception into a financial hearing. He does not do it in private. He does not sit with his daughter earlier and have a difficult conversation. He waits until guests are watching. He waits until her new husband is beside her. He waits until the room is emotionally trapped. That is important, because this tells us the demand is not only about money, it is about pressure. It is about control. It is about forcing Nell to agree to his version of the story in front of witnesses. This is one of the biggest lessons in the story. Some people do not only want your money, they want you to accept their narrative. Ward and Sylvie, Nell's parents, wanted Nell to sign a document saying they had sacrificed $500,000 for her. But what they really wanted was public agreement. They wanted the whole room to see them as noble parents, and Nell as the daughter who finally owed them. If she refused, they could say, "Look how ungrateful she is." If she signed, they could use that paper later. Either way, they planned the situation so Nell would lose. That is why her calm response matters so much. She does not only reject the bill, she rejects the story behind the bill. Now let's look at Nell's childhood, because the wedding scene did not come from nowhere. It was the final result of years of emotional training. Nell grew up hearing that she was expensive. She was not just told that life was hard or that money was tight. She was made to feel that her existence had created a debt. Her medical needs became a family weapon. Her shoes, her school trips, her braces, her hospital visits, even her survival became part of a long, emotional invoice. This is very painful because children do not know how to separate real financial stress from shame. If a parent says, "You cost us so much," a child does not think, "My parent is struggling with money." A child thinks, "I am the problem." That is why the framed line in the kitchen, "Family means sacrifice," is so important. In a normal home, that phrase could mean something beautiful. It could mean we help each other. It could mean we show up. It could mean family is not selfish. But in Nell's home, the phrase becomes a tool of guilt. Every time she needs something, her mother looks at that sign. The sign becomes a silent judge. This is strong storytelling because the object itself is simple, but the meaning changes. It shows how even soft words can become cruel when they are used to control someone. Sacrifice is not always noble. Sometimes people use sacrifice as a way to keep others small. Grandmother Arabelle is the emotional opposite of Nell's parents. She does not love loudly for attention. She protects quietly. She tells Nell, "You are not expensive, you are alive." That one sentence is the kind of sentence a child can survive on. Arabelle does not deny that Nell needed care. She does not pretend medical problems were easy, but she separates the cost from the child's worth. This is a key lesson. A person can need help and still not be a burden. A child can need medical care and still not owe their parents a repayment plan. A family can spend money and still not have the right to turn love into debt. What makes the parents' betrayal deeper is the trust. At first, we think this is only a story about parents who exaggerate what they spent. But then we learn that Arabelle had created a trust for Nell. That changes everything. It means Nell was not only shamed for costing money, she was shamed while money meant for her protection was being used behind her back. This is where the story becomes more than emotional abuse. It becomes financial manipulation. Ward and Sylvie kept telling Nell that she drained the family, but the records show that they were using funds connected to her name. They use the image of sacrifice while spending the protection her grandmother left for her. This is why the line, "You are asking me to repay a childhood you already charged to my grandmother," hits so hard. It is not just clever. It is the whole truth of the story in one sentence. Nell's parents built a public image of suffering parents, but the documents show that the story was false, or at least deeply distorted. They were not completely without costs. They did take Nell to appointments, they did raise her, but they used those real facts to hide a bigger lie. And that is often how manipulation works. It does not always invent everything from nothing. It takes a real piece of truth and stretches it until it becomes a weapon. Nell's profession is also very important. She works as a medical billing advocate. That means she helps people understand what they truly owe and what they do not owe. This is not random. Her job is connected to her wound. She grew up being treated like a bill, and as an adult, she helps others fight unfair bills. That makes the climax believable. When her father brings out an official-looking document, she knows exactly what to do. She does not panic just because paper looks serious. She has spent years learning that a bill can look official and still be wrong. That lesson becomes her power. This is a strong life lesson for the audience, too. Not every document is truth. Not every confident person is honest. Not every public speech is fair. Sometimes people use official language to scare you. They use words like agreement, reimbursement, acknowledgement, family duty, honor, and gratitude. But beautiful words can hide ugly intentions. Nell understands this. She knows that if something is being used to pressure you, you have the right to slow down, read it, question it, and refuse it. You do not have to sign something because the room is watching. You do not have to agree because someone older says you should. You do not have to turn guilt into a contract. Dane's role in the story is also worth discussing. He is supportive, but he does not take over Nell's fight. This is important. In many stories, the husband might jump up, shout at the parents, and become the hero. But here, Dane stays beside Nell. He is protective without stealing her voice. When he says, say the word, he is letting her lead. That is a healthier kind of love. He does not treat Nell like someone weak. He treats her like someone who has the right to decide how her own truth is spoken. Later, when he asks for the first dance back, he does not erase what happened. He simply helps her reclaim the moment. The contrast between Dane's family and Nell's family is another important part of the story. Burke and Lottie are not perfect, rich, dramatic saviors. They are warm, steady people. Lottie gives jam and does not ask for payment. Burke sees danger in Ward's speech and quietly warns Nell. Their love feels simple, and that simplicity is exactly what makes it powerful. Nell is not used to kindness without a hook. When Lottie says gifts do not come with a balance due, it touches something deep in Nell because she has spent her whole life expecting kindness to have a hidden price. This shows us that healing does not always come from grand speeches. Sometimes it comes from repeated small moments where someone treats you normally, gently, and without debt. Now let's talk about the wedding venue, Harbor Light Glass House. This setting is not only a background, it is part of the plot. Ward and Sylvie sell weddings, they sell family beauty, they sell love under glass walls and lake views, but the same venue becomes evidence against them. The West Glass Wall, the beautiful feature that made the place famous, was connected to money taken from Nell's trust. This is a brilliant reversal inside the story. The parents try to use the venue as a stage to shame Nell, but the stage itself becomes proof of their lie. The room where they wanted to control the story becomes the room where the truth finally becomes visible. There's also a deeper symbol here. A glass house is beautiful, but it is also fragile. People who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Ward and Sylvie built a life around image. They wanted everything to look clean, elegant, respected, and family-centered, but their foundation had hidden cracks. When Ward publicly attacked Nell, he threw the first stone inside his own glass house. He chose the audience. He chose the timing. He chose the public pressure. And because he chose public humiliation, he opened the door for public truth. This brings us to another big lesson. Do not create a public scene if you cannot survive a public answer. Nell did not start the humiliation. Her parents did. They brought the folder. They announced the amount. They involved Dane. They invited the witnesses into a private family lie. So when Nell answered in front of the same witnesses, she was not being cruel. She was matching the level of the attack. This is very important. Manipulative people often create public pressure, then act shocked when the other person responds publicly. They want the power of the audience, but not the accountability of the audience. Nell refuses that double standard. The blue envelope is the most important object in the climax. It represents preparation, truth, and self-protection. Nell does not bring it because she wants to destroy her parents. She brings it because she has learned that hope is not a plan. She hopes they will not do anything cruel, but she prepares in case they do. That is a mature form of strength. Sometimes people think strength means trusting everyone and staying soft, but real strength can also mean keeping your records, knowing your rights, and having proof ready when someone tries to rewrite your life. The blue envelope is not revenge. It is protection. The order of Nell's reveal is also important. She does not dump everything at once. First, she explains that official paper can be wrong. Then she explains that medical costs can be inflated. Then she reveals the trust. Then she shows how the money moved. Then she connects the venue and Perrin's business to the trust. This pacing makes the scene believable. It also shows Nell's intelligence. She is not just angry, she is controlled. She understands that truth is strongest when it is clear. She does not need to scream because the documents are already loud. Ward's reaction tells us a lot about him. At first, he uses moral language. He talks about honor, sacrifice, and family respect. But when the records come out, he shifts. He says the money came to them because they were parents. That sentence reveals his real belief. He thinks parenting gives him ownership. He thinks being a father gave him the right to use whatever was near the child, including money meant to protect her. But the lawyer's calm response cuts through that idea. Funds held in trust do not become personal compensation because trustees are parents. This line is simple but powerful. It separates family emotion from legal duty. Sylvie's role is more complicated, and that makes her realistic. She is not the loudest villain. She cries, softens her voice, and uses emotional language. But she also wrote the care logs. She helped create the paper version of Nell as dependent, burdensome, and costly. This is an important point. Quiet people can still cause deep harm. A person does not have to yell to be controlling. Sylvie's weapon is guilt. She says, "I kept you alive." And yes, there may be some truth in that. But Nell's answer is honest. "You helped too, Mom, but you also helped keep me guilty." That is a very mature line because it allows complexity. It does not erase the care Sylvie gave, but it also does not let that care excuse the harm. Perrin's part shows another kind of family damage. He is the golden child. He benefits from the system even when he does not fully understand it, and later he chooses not to understand because not knowing is convenient. His catering trailer was connected to money labeled for Nell's support. When he says he did not know, Calla's small truth breaks his defense. This is realistic because many family betrayals are not done only by one villain. Sometimes an entire family system is built around one person carrying the blame while others enjoy the benefits. Perrin may not have written every document, but he lived comfortably inside the lie. Calla is an interesting character because she is not Nell's best friend, and that makes her warning stronger. She is an outsider inside the family circle. She has seen enough to know something is wrong. She does not become a hero in a dramatic way. She simply chooses not to stay silent this time. That is also a lesson. You do not have to fix everything to do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is one honest warning. Sometimes it is saying, "I heard this and you need to know." Calla's small act gives Nell time to prepare. In real life, one person breaking silence can change everything. The grandmother's hidden note inside the old frame is one of the most emotional parts of the aftermath. During the main conflict, Arabelle's trust protects Nell legally, but the note protects her emotionally. It says, "Real love protects without applause." That line is the opposite of Ward and Sylvie's entire worldview. They wanted applause for sacrifice. Arabelle protected quietly. They wanted witnesses for debt. Arabelle left proof for freedom. They used family language to collect. Arabelle used love to shield. This shows that not all family inheritance is money. Sometimes the most important inheritance is a sentence that helps you believe you were never the problem. The aftermath is also realistic because the story does not end with instant justice. The legal process takes time. There are lawyers, records, missing documents, settlement talks, and partial repayment. This is important because real life is not always a dramatic courtroom win. Sometimes justice is slow, incomplete, and exhausting. But even partial truth can change a life. Nell does not need every dollar returned to become free. What she needs most is the official statement that she owes them nothing. That sentence gives her something money cannot fully provide. It gives her the right to stop carrying a debt that was never hers. Another beautiful part of the ending is what Nell does with the repayment. She does not use it to show off. She starts the Arabelle Knox Patient Relief Fund. This completes her emotional arc. Her parents used medical costs to shame her. Her grandmother used money to protect her. Nell takes that protection and turns it into help for others. That is healing. Not because she forgets what happened, but because she refuses to become like the people who hurt her. She does not turn pain into control. She turns it into service with boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries because this story is really a boundary story. Nell does not forgive everyone instantly. She does not run back to her parents because her mother writes one honest letter. She does not pretend the wedding scene was just a misunderstanding. She allows truth, but she does not force closeness. This is a very important lesson. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, does not mean giving people the same access to hurt you again. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is the shape of self-respect. Nell's boundary says, I can understand how you became this way, but I will not keep paying for it with my peace. The mother's letter is powerful because it gives a rare moment of self-awareness. Sylvie writes, I called you a burden because if I called you protected, I would have had to admit I spent your protection. This is not a perfect apology, but it is truth, and sometimes truth comes before apology. The story does not force Nell to respond immediately. That is important. When someone hurts you for years, they do not get to choose the speed of your healing. A letter may be a start, but it is not a repair by itself. Ward never apologizes, and that also feels real. Some people would rather lose relationships than lose their version of themselves. Ward built his identity around being the sacrificing father, the respected venue owner, the man who carried the family. To apologize would mean admitting he used his daughter's life as a business asset and emotional shield. He cannot face that. So he sends a check with a cold memo line. That is sad, but believable. Not every villain gives a final confession. Some people only reveal themselves by what they still cannot say. One of the strongest ideas in this story is the difference between care and ownership. Parents do have responsibilities. Raising children is expensive. Medical care is stressful. Family life requires sacrifice. The story is not saying parents never struggle. It is saying struggle does not create ownership over a child. You cannot feed a child and later demand payment for the meals. You cannot take a sick child to the doctor and later use that child's illness as proof they owe you. Parenting is not a loan. Care is not a contract. A child is not an investment account waiting to mature. This story also teaches us to question family myths. Every family has stories it repeats. In Nell's family, the story was, Nell was expensive. Nell drained us. Nell should be grateful. Nell owes us. That story was repeated so often that it sounded like truth. But records showed another side. This can happen in many families, even without money. One person becomes the difficult one, the selfish one, the sensitive one, or the ungrateful one. And because the label is repeated, everyone starts treating it like fact. Nell's journey reminds us that a repeated story is not always an honest story. Another lesson is about calm strength. Nell's power does not come from being emotionless. She feels everything. She feels the childhood pain, the betrayal, the fear, the grief, the shock. But she does not let her parents use her emotion against her. She speaks clearly. She uses facts. She refuses to sign. She writes, "Denied." That one word works because the whole story has built toward it. It is not just a legal rejection. It is a spiritual rejection. She is denying the debt, denying the lie, denying the role they gave her, denying the idea that gratitude must become payment. The first dance after the confrontation is also meaningful. The parents tried to steal that moment. Dane gives it back. But notice the dance does not erase the pain. The room is still shaken. People are still processing. The music starts slowly. Guests join carefully. This is what healing often looks like. Not instant happiness, not a perfect celebration, just one small act of reclaiming what was taken. Nell and Dane dance because their marriage should not begin under her parents' folder. They choose each other in the middle of the mess. That choice is quiet, but it is powerful. For the audience, this story asks a very personal question. Where in your life have you signed things emotionally that you never agreed to? Maybe not a real document. Maybe you signed by staying silent. Maybe you signed by accepting blame. Maybe you signed by paying for peace. Maybe you signed by believing someone else's version of you. Nell's story reminds us that we can stop. We can read the paper again. We can ask, is this true? Do I really owe this? Or did someone teach me to feel guilty because guilt made me easier to control? There is also a lesson about preparation. Nell's calm moment at the wedding was not magic. It came from work. She gathered records. She spoke to an attorney. She understood what she could say and what she should not say. She did not rely only on anger. This matters in real life. If someone is manipulating you financially or emotionally, feelings are valid, but documentation protects you. Keep records. Save messages. Understand your rights. Talk to people who know the system. Truth is important, but organized truth is stronger. And finally, the story leaves us with a beautiful reversal. At the beginning, Nell's parents try to define her as a debt. By the end, she defines herself as free. Her parents demand $500,000. Her grandmother's protection answers from the past. The blue envelope becomes a bridge between the child who is shamed and the woman who refuses to carry that shame anymore. The wedding does not go perfectly, but maybe it becomes something more honest than perfect. It becomes the day Nell stops paying for a lie. So what can we learn from Nell's story? We learn that love should not be used as a receipt. We learn that parents can struggle without turning children into debtors. We learn that public pressure is not the same as truth. We learn that a document can be official and still be wrong. We learn that silence can protect lies, but one prepared truth can change the room. We learn that healthy love does not demand ownership. And maybe most importantly, we learn that you are allowed to refuse a role you were trained to play. Nell did not win because she humiliated her parents. She won because she stopped accepting humiliation as normal. She won because she did not sign. She won because she let the truth stand in the same room where the lie had been performed. That is the real lesson of this story. Sometimes freedom is not loud. Sometimes it is a blue envelope, a steady voice, and one word written across a line where your name was supposed to become a debt. Denied. The end.